Oh my God. Okay.
Okay. So, we wait a little bit more, or Jason, do you want to start?
Let's see. I think we should probably start. We've got quite a few
Nice.
people. So, all right. So, thank you everyone for joining our series of PRAGMA Reconnect webinars. Today, I think we have a pretty exciting couple presentations. Actually, mine less so than the other Jason, and so this should be an interesting session since we both have the same first name. So people have to be clear on who they're talking to, but should make it pretty entertaining. So as I mentioned in the agenda, what we're going to talk about first is we're going to have both Nan and I are going to talk a little bit, just give about a 15-minute overview on some activity in Asia and specifically some use cases, and with SAGE2, and then we'll hand it over to Jason and his team, Luke as well, from University EVL in Chicago, and they're going to tell us all about the wonderful next generation SAGE3. So it should be really interesting. So without further delay, I hope I can share my presentation. So Nan and I are going to start this off here, and hopefully let's see if I could get to my presentation. Let's see. And if I go into presentation mode, hopefully, maybe.
So Jason, oops.
Yeah.
Jason, is Nan going to also speak, in which case I'm going to spotlight her as well?
Yes, she will speak as well. So
yeah, but I will pick up after Jason finishes, so we can do one at a time.
Yes. So how do I get the Google Slides to go into presentation mode if I'm sharing it?
You should be able. Is that when you hit present? Does it work?
Oh, present to the meeting. Present to.
There.
Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay. So hopefully everyone can see my slides.
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's see. Now I need to figure out how to go backwards. Oh, okay. Got it. All right. So both Nan and I are going to talk a little bit about SAGE2, about users and in Asia and some use cases. We've had some interest. Both Nan and I have been working quite collaboratively over the last several years through a variety of students to do some work in SAGE2, and most recently, she has actually secured some equipment, which I will talk about in just a minute. So as far as Asia, the user community, so there has been actually quite a bit of activity over the last couple of years. There have been, in addition to my wall at AIST, there have been actually several other walls that have come up, have gone online throughout Southeast Asia. In particular, Mahidol University had one about 2 or 3 years ago. While Chris from Wailalak University, we held a workshop there, a land stage workshop. I'll talk a little bit about that too. But they have a wall as well. And Thammasat, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam also have new walls coming up, and hopefully with this month or into next month. And most recently too, the University of Tokyo, our friend from the glyph community, Tomohiro Kudo, actually has installed this gigantic dual wall system. And I helped him get SAGE2 running on it. So it'll be exciting to see what he has planned for that into the future. But so it's interesting, there's been quite a bit of activity going on in Southeast Asia recently over the last couple of years. And so it's really great to see. The Thammasat site, So, you know, there have been before, even though NAN has just gotten some of the hardware, we actually have had a couple of SAGE2 workshops just using a regular projector screen. I did this twice so far, gave a training session at Thammasat 2 times, and it was very well received. As you can see in the picture on the bottom, I had something like 40 to 50, 60 students participate. They've also, and we also, Jason Lee and I also had done a presentation as well to a lot of the faculty there about SAGE2 as part of the Land SAGE activities that we're doing. And so it's been really successful, and we think that there's a lot of momentum and interest at Thammasat, as well as throughout Mahidol, Thailand and the rest of Southeast Asia. So really exciting, as I said, NAN has just gotten some hardware. It was installed in August. It's a 4x2 configuration with 55-inch screens, 2 RTX 3070 Ti graphics cards are driving it all. And this is all part of our Land SAGE2 project. And so the Land SAGE2 project, which I've been leading, is basically trying to build up visualization capacity in Southeast Asia and focus in on the use case of mitigating and helping to manage landslide disasters and floods. So this is part of the Tian Asia Connect funding, and it's been pretty successful. And so we're really happy that this has actually came to be. The pandemic, of course, has been causing a variety of logistical issues all throughout this process, but this has actually been really, it's really great to see it. It's up and running, it's working. Again, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam will also be getting a similar wall. I think they're all 4x2s and similar configuration. And so it'll be exciting to see what we can do into the future with that. All right. So that's just a little bit about the users in Southeast Asia. And so now I'm going to switch over to kind of talking about some of the use cases. I'm going to talk about one that I've done with Mahidol University, and then Nan will talk about a couple more. And so one of these is, and the rationale behind this is that, you know, we've been trying to experiment with, from an application perspective, you know, what could you do with SAGE2 and trying to, and CyberCanoes, and trying to make it into, or trying to demonstrate kind of the depth and breadth of the application or use cases that can be had with this technology and software. So one of the things that we've done is create a visual workflow for cybersecurity standards. So you know, as everyone knows, cybersecurity standards are really large documents with 100 pages of text, and it's really a challenge to understand and compare these large volumes of information. And so we kind of created this fairly straightforward, simple application to visualization application to better enable stakeholders to compare scenarios and improve their decision-making process. And so we based it all off of this Nist cybersecurity framework. So again, that was a PDF, and Nist had divided created all these functions and categories to kind of help people work through cybersecurity standards. But it's all in a PDF document. And so what we ended up doing was we kind of took that as the framework for the application. We then parsed all the information from the different cybersecurity standards. You can see the whole list of there: CIS, COBIT, ISA, ISO, and Nist. And then we actually created this application where people could map out different standard scenarios and try and understand which one of these standards would be the most applicable, or could they even apply it to what they're trying to do. And so probably the easiest way to show this is through a short little video demo. And again, we did this with our partners at Mahidol University. So let's hope this video plays. Hopefully, let's see. Hopefully that's fairly clear. It should be playing in HD. Yes, should be. Okay. So this is actually just a screen capture of our wall. So you have to think about this as a very large, you know, display wall. This is the one that I'm using at AIST. And so we created this application where you could have the the 5 different functions: identify, protect, detect, I guess it's recover, what is it? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't even read that, but recover. It has the different functions, and then people can actually drill down through the different functions and select different categories of things that they want to do. And so as they do that, they can drill down through the cybersecurity scenarios that they want. And at the end here, hopefully it's visible, it'll show you the actual informative references. In other words, what section from each one of the different cybersecurity standards apply to this, what they want to do. And so with this, then you can actually try out different scenarios. And you can actually, so if someone wants to identify and detect for a particular scenario, then they can actually pop all that information up onto the screen rather than having to sift through multiple different PDF documents. And so if I just go forward a little bit here, so this is just kind of showing you that you can, again, select the different types of scenarios that you want. And I think this is a good place to show you right here, is that if they wanted to do these, the blue and the red, right? If they wanted to do those 2 things, if it may be a little bit difficult to see, but here, this ISA, it shows the informative reference, but then for this particular scenario here to respond, the ISA doesn't support it. There is no reference for it. So then so perhaps ISA is not the particular standard to be using. They might want to choose something else. And so it's just one example of how to be able to go through different scenarios and compare them, and taking advantage of these larger thinking spaces and organizing the information from these different PDFs in a way that can help people make decisions. And so we also tried to, so this is a good example. This was, again, this is an early prototype, but we also said, okay, well, if they want to know what to do, they can click on the informative reference. So in this case, we clicked on the Nist reference, and it tells them exactly what they're supposed to do. Now, obviously, that probably is not the way, it's not the best way to present the information. And we didn't really have a good way yet to figure out how to do that, but at least the information was there. I will definitely agree that it's not the best way to do it. But again, we were trying to figure out how to get people to, okay, so once they decide on which standard to use, what are they supposed to do, and how did they do it? So as you can see, I mean, this is parsed directly from the PDF. And so there's just a ton of information in these PDFs. And so we think that this is kind of an interesting use case to be able to take advantage of these larger thinking spaces that are provided to us on these, in the CyberCanoe and these display walls. Okay, so that's that use case. And so now let's see, hopefully I can go forward. Next one, there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Nan, and she can talk about the other couple of use cases that we've actually worked on.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So in the next application here, we have the peer-to-peer virtual network overlay technology from UF called Hvpn, or many people know it as IPOP. That's a formal name. And monitoring and troubleshooting is an essential part to ensure that these overlay network function properly. So previously, people are doing, like network admin are doing it manually with CLI, and they face some challenges, especially with large and highly dynamic network. So when nodes join and leave the P2P overlay dynamically, in this case, they form into a ring topology to minimize latency. And we have the data collector that collects information from the overlay network in real time and store them in the time series database. And then the SAGE2 application can pull out the data from this time series database for visualization, which will allow network admin to work with both context and detail. Next, please. This application, we call it Hvpn Visualization, and it's a collaboration between 4 different institutions here: Thammasat, AIST, Florida, and UCSD. Now let's see the demo of how it works. So is it in HD, Jason?
It should
right?
be. Yeah, it is. Auto 1080p.
Okay, thank you. So in this application, you can select the network overlay to view its entire topology. And you have nodes and tunnels, aka links here. We use different colors to indicate different status of nodes and link. And here you can see statistic on each link. And yeah, so you can explore each different component here and can zoom in, zoom out. So in many cases, you might have so many nodes and links. For example, when you use Hvpn for smart cities kind of application, you might have hundreds of nodes. And it may be a little bit hard to find a particular node or links that you want. So we have a search feature that will allow you to search for a particular one and highlight that in the main window over there. And also in this app, we have several different views of network. You can have topology view that you are currently viewing right now, subgraph view and map view. If we need to examine subgraphs of this overlay simultaneously, you can populate subgraph views and show them side by side and utilize the space of the SAGE wall. This come in handy when network admin try to troubleshoot the network. And as you can see here, they're all in sync with the main window. And also in sync with the map view that show exact geographical locations of nodes as well. Okay, I think we can move on to the next one. And for the next application, our motivation came from the fact that we have met and talked with several people who have data dashboard, and some already have them on the video wall, although not with SAGE. There are so many easy to use tools to build the dashboard that require no coding skill. And next, please. Google Data Studio is one such tool that we picked, and it's allowed us to create different kinds of data visualization, and you can also organize them into several pages. And this is partly to overcome the space of the typical screen. However, often there are some relations between components from different pages, like one page can link to another page. Next, please. So in this application, we allow any user who has a Google Data Studio dashboard to create a custom visual workflow for his or her own dashboard. And then this workflow will turn into a configuration file for our SAGE2 application. And this SAGE2 application can present the linked data in these pages on SAGE wall automatically for the user. Next, please. So we call this S2DS by the fact that it's come from combining SAGE2 with Google Data Studio. And it's a collaboration that I did with AIST, with Jason. Next, please. So in this demo, we use the GDS dashboard for PM 2.5 data from Taiwan. Our partner, NCSC, is the one who provides us the data. And we have 5 pages altogether in this dashboard. So on the right, can you click one more time? Yes.
Yep.
On the right, there are visual workflow that we create by dragging and dropping of shapes. And we specify the parameters linking between pages. And this workflow then turn into the configuration file, as I said earlier. So let's see how it's work on our wall. So in this app, we have in the main window, the map showing the PM 2.5 device in their locations. And also down below, we have a pie chart summing up the total number of devices in each zone. And to the left, there's a bar chart telling the median PM 2.5 in each zone. And here we can still use all interaction in Google Data Studio. It still works normally, like the Earth view, Street view, the zoom in, zoom out. And what we do is we do the reverse engineering, capturing the click from user mouse pointer. So when we click on one individual pin that denote a device on the map, you can see that window on the upper left updated with the specific data to that device. And also the same thing can be done with the pie chart. So if I select each individual slice of the pie chart down there, the values, which in this case is a zone letter, can be sent to the bottom windows to the left. So you can view specific zone data according to that workflow that you created earlier. So here I show the daily information on the left and monthly information to the right of that zone. And there's also other different kinds of charts that we didn't show here in this demo video, like line chart, table, bar chart, that can also send the data in its chart to other pages. So this might be one starting step that we can help people who has data but does not have someone to code the specific SAGE app to utilize the SAGE2 wall. And that's it for my part. And next, Jason Lee and Luke will present the exciting next generation SAGE3. Thank you.
I should mention very quickly that the video was captured on actually Nan's wall. So it's actually, you're looking at a screen capture of her actual wall in operation. So SAGE2 does work on her wall. All right, so that concludes our little presentation. Let's see, hopefully I can stop the share. All right, and I guess, as Nan said, we're going to hand it over to Jason. I guess maybe we should open it up for if there are a couple questions, I guess, if anybody has any questions about some of the applications, maybe if anybody has any questions or comments. No, everybody wants to see the next generation SAGE3, I suppose. All right, well, let's forge ahead then, and let's hand it over to Jason and his team.
Okay, let's see. How do I spotlight? Okay, I'm going to spotlight this video. Excuse me. And I'm going to spotlight this video. And I'll add Luke as well, maybe. Okay. All right, everybody. So that was SAGE2. Things have progressed quite a bit since SAGE2. And hopefully, we're hoping in maybe November, people have access to SAGE3. And instead of talking too long about it, I think I'm going to try and give you as much of a demonstration as possible. First of all, what I'd like to mention is that on one of your screens, we are actually looking at, actually, if Ryan could just jump in there so he's physically there, we can see that is our display wall in Hawaii. It has a touch screen on it, and there's Ryan. And this we're running basically SAGE3 on. Now I'm going to jump into SAGE3 on my laptop, and I'm going to show you a demonstration of it as it's running on my laptop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen and jump into this. And hopefully you can see Zoom sharing my, where's my SAGE3 now? I have too many screens on my laptop. Okay. So, oops, yeah. So you're seeing SAGE3 basically running on my laptop. So some of you who might have been familiar with SAGE2 in the past, you might recall that typically in SAGE2, you control everything from your laptop, but you're actually viewing on the large display wall. In SAGE3, thanks to COVID, basically people couldn't go into the labs to use their large display wall. So what that did for us was, well, we thought this would be an opportunity to change the design of SAGE so that people could still work on their laptops as if they were in front of a display wall, and create a world where it's persistent so that when they are able to come back into their labs and in front of their SAGE display wall, everything would appear as they'd expect. So for those of you who are new to this, I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to show you, actually, I'm going to use cheat and double click on this. You're looking at basically my slides shown on Google. Basically, this is Google Slides. And I just want to quickly introduce the folks who are involved in this project. There's myself in Hawaii with Maddie Belkade, who's the lead for the artificial intelligence that's part of this project. Ryan Thurio, who's our software developer here in Hawaii. In Chicago, we have Andy Johnson back in Electronic Visualization Lab, Maxine Brown and Luke Winnebo, who's here today. And then partnering with us is Chris North at Virginia Tech, who's been really helping us rethink the user interface experience for SAGE3. And of course, none of this is possible without all the wonderful students that we have to work on these software, passing on the torch, training the next generation, that kind of stuff. Because we can't develop this stuff forever. The students have to really learn how to do this stuff. So in the past, when SAGE first started back in 2004, there was only one SAGE and it was funded by the National Science Foundation Optiputer project. Fast forward to today, we have about 800 sites and about 4,000 users. And in 2017, when we were doing some statistics, we found that on average, 61% of the sites had one display, whereas about 39% had about more than one display. And most of the displays were used several times a week. Meeting sizes ranged anywhere between 2 and 200, and people were using it from everything from archaeology to statistics, the full gamut. So how do we get from SAGE1 to SAGE3? Well, SAGE1 emerged in the world of cluster computing, and those cluster computers that drive display walls were on the order of $500,000 to $1 million each. And at that time, back in 2004, grid computing was the big thing. The world was using Globus. Actually, the world still is using Globus. But it was also the year when Facebook first emerged. And then in 2014, when we started releasing SAGE2, the world was shifting to driving SAGE walls with single PCs. So now SAGE walls are between 100,000 to 300,000. And the buzzword was science portals, gateways, and cloud computing. And also the big trendy thing back then in 2014 was the ALS ice bucket water bucket challenge. right here. And then 2020 was when NSF funded us to develop SAGE3, and that's when COVID basically hit. And what we did was we took that opportunity to redevelop SAGE2 completely from scratch. Now it works entirely from single laptops all the way up to display walls, which now you can build almost as cheaply as putting together multiple 4K TVs to, that cost no more than like $250. So here actually on the bottom right-hand corner is my house and my desk in my house where I have two 49-inch TVs that were $250 each, and I had a SAGE wall essentially running at home. But I don't have to do that anymore because SAGE3 actually works entirely in a laptop environment. So, and then the trend today with tech is that we're going to data science notebooks, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and containers, and this NSF's notion of this cyber ecosystem. So where SAGE3 is basically going is in that same direction, and we're going to create greater emphasis on artificial intelligence as helpers in the scientific collaboration process. I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment as we advance through the demo and the slides. Oops, I don't want to edit the slides. Okay, let me just skip this for now and just show you what SAGE is like, and then I'll come back to some of these slides. So, like I said, I'm running SAGE3 on my laptop. You can sort of see my laptop waving here in the background. So one thing you want to pay attention to is that you want to pay attention to my laptop screen, but you also want to pay attention to the display wall, and you can see things that are synchronized between the two screens. So I'm going to zoom out on my laptop so I can show you more of the space. And I'm going to reduce my slide set a bit. Right, and then you'll see also up there in the display wall, it's also reducing. You probably see Ryan's pointer on the bottom there, and you can see my pointer. You can look at, for example, the top left-hand corner. I have a PDF file, which I can open up nice and big, or actually I can add multiple slides to it. Let me zoom in and add some more slides to it. And so these were actually my lecture slides that I used yesterday to give my class lecture, and I can zip through them. So as I zip through these slides, if you look on the screen at our display wall, everything is in sync on our display wall. So I don't actually have to come into the office anymore to use a giant display wall. I could be in a coffee shop in Waikiki on the beach, working in front of my SAGE display wall. So this is what's majorly new about the SAGE experience. On top of that, all the other things that I used to be able to do in SAGE, I can also do, like, for example, I can bring up this Google Maps, make it big. And then now, since this is a fully collaborative environment, I don't have to be the one to do most of the work. Brian, for example, could poke around and move stuff around, change stuff. Luke can do that too, right? And while Luke might be messing with the map, right, Ryan could be up on the touch screen right here, and he could be doodling, making notes on the touch wall. Oh, there's Ryan. So he could be, drawing stuff. And Luke is actually typing a little post-it note right there. So, now more than ever, SAGE really promotes the ability for people to work on multiple documents simultaneously. We're able to bring in Google Docs, we're able to bring in leaflet maps, Google Maps, PDF documents. I can also share my laptop screen, just like I used to be able to do in SAGE2. So I'm going to share my laptop screen. It's going to look kind of weird, but here it is. It's going to be this kind of recursive effect going on. So I'm actually sharing now my laptop screen onto the SAGE wall. And just as in the previous version of SAGE, you'll be able to share multiple laptop screens simultaneously to all collaborating sites. We're not doing this now for this demo because we're still working on some performance issues for screen sharing. So I'm going to limit that, or it could just crash and be the end of our demo, or a very embarrassing end to our demo. And of course, we can certainly show synchronized video between sites now. Oops, sorry. Somebody pressed play and I stopped it. So if you look at my laptop share and the one on the wall, it's roughly in sync. It tries its best to synchronize. And we can also turn on audio so you can hear the audio. These, by the way, are visualizations from the visualization competition from the PERC conference last year, which Gwen was in charge of. Gwen Jacobs. Okay. So let me just leave this environment and go back from scratch to show you what's going on. So I'm going to go back to my main desktop environment, and this is what the lobby kind of looks like right now. And as you can see, the lobby has a bunch of different boards. Eventually, we'll have separate rooms where groups can create their own private rooms with boards. But I was just in the Lava PRAGMA board, and you can see a little icon showing that other people, Brian and so forth, are also part of this board. Or I could jump into, say, the EVL board, and I can see what's on their board, right? So while I'm doing that, I can look at, oh, actually, Andy, no, Andy's not teaching class. I was thinking, hey, I'm going to mess up Andy's class.
Andy is here if he wants to answer.
So I'm now joining in on Andy's board, but at the same time, if you look up on this back on our lab screen, the lab could potentially be still participating in some other board, right? So now we can have multiple boards going on. Now, the beauty of all this is that we're hosting this entire service entirely in Chicago. No one has had to install any software, on their computers and and just drive people crazy. You just have to download the SAGE client app onto your laptop and run it. And you type in your login and you're ready to go. In the past, when we installed SAGE2, there was a lot of training that had to go on to install it on their servers and configure the server. Now all that is practically disappeared. Everything is Dockerized into virtual machines that run entirely in Chicago. So what that means moving forward is that in the future, we're going to create these Dockerized containers so that individual universities and research institutions can just run these Docker instances in their campuses, and they can manage their own SAGE services for their campus. And then the users can just use the SAGE client to connect in and use it for class activities, can use it for lab activities, and so forth. So let me jump back to here. And I'm gonna stop for now and maybe give Luke and Ryan a chance to say a few words if I missed anything.
Yeah, I think, Jason said it, but I want to reiterate a little bit that SAGE3 is really driven by the change on how people work or are going to work in the future. So we are more distributed than ever. And so that change, and like Jason said, the way we interact and the way we collaborate it looks like in SAGE2 we were mostly room first, and then we're adding a remote room, and so it was room to room. Here almost everybody is remote, and everybody sees the same thing. And the second aspect that we didn't address yet is the whole AI part of the project. And if you can think of AI, it's less about programming more these days. With AI, it's mostly about the data, and it's preparing data and curating data, and then preparing data set, and then feeding them to a trained model, for instance, and then tweaking the model to adapt to your data set. For instance, if you had a model that recognize images, but now you are recognizing different type of images, for instance, so you have to retrain the model and then do inferencing. So if you want to think about the IDEs or the programming environment for the data scientist might be fairly different from what we're used to with just a coding editor. So it's a lot more about the data. And so that's where, again, we want to go with SAGE3, to leverage a wall to be able to see most of the data and manage data to be fed to AI models, for instance. And so that was a two big trend in the design of SAGE3. Is like the way people work is changing, and the way people do science is changing. And so we want to capture those differences into the design. And otherwise, practically, yes, like in SAGE2, there's a notion of application. So there's a whole framework for people to develop applications. So we developed like before a list of applications like PDF viewer, image viewer. We have a notebook viewer. We are working on Python cells, for instance, to explore the idea of, can we go beyond the notebook or the Jupyter notebook, which is very, very, very popular, but fairly rigid, not very collaborative. And so can we change that? So we're exploring having pieces of code floating on the wall and being able to connect them and to connect to cyber infrastructure backend to execute those pieces of code, like connecting to a supercomputer or a supercomputing facility to execute models and so on. So it's really just the beginning of this changing world on how people conduct science and programming for AI. We can talk a little bit about the technologies, but maybe there's more pressing questions. I don't know.
I just want to add an addendum to what Luke was saying. In trying to make some of the artificial intelligence capabilities more accessible, apart from the Python Jupyter type cells that we're going to embed into Sage. Actually, we're going to call them Sage books. They're actually, two-dimensional Python cell notebook kind of things. As far as the backend stuff, prior, a lot of the supercomputing stuff was done on clusters with Globus and so forth. A lot of what we're exploring now is to take advantage of automated AI computing capabilities in the cloud, but also we've hoped to demonstrate at supercomputing the use of FunkX, which is Ian Foster's latest work with Dan Katz, basically to create functions as a service. So what that means is that all these AI capabilities are going to be encapsulated into functions that could be run on available services anywhere in the world. And so we hope that in our work, all these functions will not be actually computed local to our computing capability, but using FunkX, we can ship them out to different locations for doing the AI computation. So FunkX is pretty exciting to us. I think it's going to open up a lot of opportunities. And it's great that, once again, Ian Foster is in the lead for these, innovative new ideas. So let me jump back to give you a little bit of perspective about how does it feel to work in front of a Sage wall, versus classically in front of just a projector and with laptop. So we did this little experiment. Chris North, who's our user interaction research scientist from Virginia Tech, he did this little experiment with our group. We were the guinea pigs for his experiment. Basically, he asked the students in the lab to rate what they feel about SAGE2 under the following criteria. So for example, using this technology, I maintain focus on the meeting. Using this technology, I contribute content to the meeting. I find it easy to contribute content. I actively participate in the meeting. I get sufficient feedback. I find it easy to make suggestions. I enjoy. And so they were asking students to rate how they feel. And a lot of them agreed that SAGE2 really helped facilitate meeting, the meeting in much more energetic and creative ways. And so one day, Chris said, well, let's do an experiment by removing SAGE2 and forcing people to go back to the way they used to have meetings, which was in front of a projector and one projector with one projector cable that they have to pass around the room to give presentations. And so looking at this data, you can see people suddenly became much more dissatisfied. It's almost like once you get a taste of working in SAGE2, it's really hard to go back to the old way. And what's interesting about this is that when the pandemic finally hit, so these two data were collected before the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, we went to Zoom. And notice that Zoom is remarkably similar to the model of just the classical PowerPoint projector. So one thing that Chris noticed now that students are starting to return back to campus is that the students are now so used to using Zoom for their classes and for their class work. When they're back physically together, it's almost like they don't know how to interact physically together anymore. And what he found was that the students were sitting opposite each other, but using Zoom, even though they're in the same room, because they were so used to sharing information between their laptops. And so Chris immediately thought, wow, this is a huge opportunity for SAGE3 to fill that gap, where instead of just making it like a PowerPoint projector that you're sharing, now you have a shared canvas of lots of different kinds of information. So we're looking forward to potentially doing yet another study to see what is the post-pandemic collaboration model look like, comparing Zoom and comparing SAGE3. So I think we're going to stop here as far as the presentation. We're anxious to also hear some questions or some feedback from the audience. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen so you can open it up for discussion. Anyone have any questions?
I do.
Jason? Oh,
I'll
how are we
wait.
gonna-
Oh, go ahead.
How are we going to mediate this?
Yeah, I know. I was just gonna. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, thanks, Jason and Luke, for the presentation. But I think we're gonna try and keep it casual, right? So I think if anybody has any questions or comments, perhaps either raise your hand or I guess speak up. We'll try.
or you can type into the chat box and say,
yeah, type in the chat.
And
yeah.
we can, like the old-fashioned arcades where you can see.
I think Gwen and I collided. So Gwen, why don't you go first and I'll go second? How about that?
Hi, David. Nice to
Sounds
see
good.
you. Yeah. No, this is super cool. Jason, what I'm wondering is, this looks like the new way to use your desktop, and all those tabs and things that we're always trying to keep track of. My question is can you actually get away from work now, or the fact that you can do work everywhere? I just think this is really cool, and it seems like it would be a wonderful way to kind of manage, multiple conversations and projects and things like that. I'm just thinking that this is the new desktop to have.
It could be. I mean, it could be. I mean, certainly you know, COVID has trained a lot of people to work remotely, and I think they're hooked, right? They're hooked on the drug of being able to work in nice places. So yeah, I think but the difficulty, and then when we're seeing lots of companies starting to do
That's
very
a,
simple things, right, to address this. So yeah, this is a huge opportunity for SAGE3.
cool. Thanks.
So, yeah, I agree. I think it's a really nice evolution, guys. So it's good to see how that's moving. And, you know, my lab, we could have gone back into the lab ages ago, and the guys have chosen just not to do that. I'm working from home. We're all working from home. The AI bit, I still don't get, Jason, Luke. I can't get my head around. What can you summarize for me? What's special about SAGE and AI? I mean, we've got kind of understand the rest of it.
So there are three components actually. I should have said that from the start. So one aspect of it is just improving the user experience of using SAGE3. So imagine if you were like in a brainstorming session where users are basically posting lots of Post-it notes on the screen, right? We've done this a lot with the LandSage community, where we're trying to brainstorm for new ideas. You can imagine running AI service where it's actually reading the text, all the Post-it notes, and we can have it do clustering of similar ideas, right? So those kinds of facilitating services, that's one of them.
So that's using AI in SAGE to do a better job of the visualization. That,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
Is there more? Or that I get,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah, and the motivation for doing that was that we noticed that as people threw more and more content on the wall, the humans have to get in there and keep everything organized. And so this is an opportunity for looking at AI techniques. So that's one.
All right.
The other one is more for a lot of researchers, domain science researchers, who really still don't want to write code to do AI. They don't feel that they want to invest in writing things like Python codes. And so we're seeing commercially lots of tools now that are like almost like flow diagram-y ways of doing coding. And what that means is, you know, they want modules of AI processing, which they could feed one node into another. So imagine you have one node that consists of a whole bunch of images that you want to process. You know, like images of coral reef, right? And then you have another node which actually does, you know, filtering to find specific types of, you know, subsets of the things that you're looking for in the coral reef. And then you have some other node that might be simply counting or categorizing or right clustering what they find. So this is where this is what Maddie Belkade, who's our AI guy, is working on, trying to figure out what some of these reusable AI services that we can put into SAGE3 to make some of that visual programming capability easier. And then the third component is there are a lot of folks who are learning Jupyter, right? And they feel by using Jupyter, it's great, but it's still very linear. You know, Jupyter Notebooks is basically a linear notebook. At the same time, Microsoft is pushing hard on, well, how do you embed AI services into a spreadsheet style format, basically Excel, right? There's a lot of power in the familiarity of Excel. A lot of business analysts would rather stay in this kind of Excel-like space. So we thought there's an opportunity to do this bridge between the linear Jupyter cell and the two-dimensional Excel kind of concept by creating something in between called, I don't know, Sage Books, where you can essentially create this two-dimensional bunches of Jupyter-like cells, which you can write codes into, right? And then you can feed them into each other, right? So it's almost like an extension of the visual programming metaphor, but for people who still want to delve into the actual codes. And then the idea was that we could take all these Jupyter codes and then bundle it into nodes, which you can then turn into visual programming nodes, for the higher level folks. So that's the, the one day we would like to be there kind of vision for where we want to go. Does that help, David?
It does a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Jason, Jason, can you hear me?
Yes, Chris.
What you talk about just now is that the thing that Google is trying to do as well with their Google Sheet?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do, a lot of people are trying to do. There's a group called obviously.ai, where basically you're just typing in natural language queries, and it will try to figure out what kind of AI and visualization services need to be put together, where you're only doing this through English queries, not coding at all. And we've done some work in this area too. We have a separate project that involves using natural language to automatically generate visualizations. And we've been doing this for quite a while now. And then we're seeing that more and more we need to have natural language capabilities translate into actual AI modules, because it needs to be a lot of processing before we produce the right visualizations. Yeah, so a lot of people are doing this and are very interested in doing this right now. Yeah. So it's a very rich research area is what I'm saying.
Okay. I have a question in the chat box, if you can have a look.
Yes. Yeah. So Chris was asking about, because he's developing software to run on SAGE2, and he was wondering if would this framework for that on SAGE3 be different? Or there's some new, yes, and it is, yeah.
So that's the bad news. The bad news is SAGE3 is a complete rewrite of SAGE2. There's nothing left of SAGE2. We had to do it. Originally, when we wrote, any NSF program managers here? No. When we wrote the proposal for SAGE2, we were going to extend on SAGE2, but because the world had changed so much when we started SAGE2, the only rational thing to do was to actually rebuild a lot of things from scratch, and it's actually so much better because we are doing it again. So that means for SAGE3, yes, you have to rewrite the apps. We're still working on the API to make it possible for people to write apps. But the good news is you can still develop apps as just web apps, and they will still run in SAGE3. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. And yes. So when you were looking at my presentation slides in Google, Slides, I was just running Google services from within SAGE3. Right. What developing custom apps for SAGE3 will let you do, however, is that you can have apps talk to each other, right? And send messages to add new windows, kind of like what you were seeing with Jason and Nan's application. Apps are communicating with each other. And the potential there is kind of great, because you can imagine someone writes some visualization app, somebody else writes some analytics app. So long as you know how to talk to each other, you can have analytics sent to different visualization modules, which is the goal for what Nan was doing. So in some ways, I really applaud what Jason and Nan have done, and I also apologize that you have to redo it again in SAGE3. But maybe that's another opportunity to write another grant proposal to update.
True.
And in some ways, there's a sense that some of the visualizations that were built in SAGE2 might be able to be built in SAGE3 just by basically talking to various applications that we provide. Like there's a web view and an image viewer and a note application, but you could glue all that with a few lines of Python, for instance, using just the APIs that we expose. So if you have a purely visual application, like you want to visualize a new type of data, like a point cloud or something like that, then you will have to write a SAGE3 app. And by the way, it's all React based, so there's a lot of stuff available around. But if your application is more like a dashboard of some kind, it might be possible to write that completely programmatically while you are in SAGE3 using, for instance, the Python cells or something like that. So retrieve that data set, put it into the asset manager, visualize it with a built-in tools like a table viewer and things like that, and do composite application that way. We have not completely fleshed out all those details, but I think we have a good sense that's probably where we are going. And like Jason said, we still have the web browser built in. So yeah, if you have a Plotly app or anything, even just your Jupyter notebook, you can load it up and it will display. So
yeah, I'm starting to read some of the chat notes. David, I saw your note. That's great. I'd like to look more deeply into your active sheets. Okay, Sebastian, you said, is there an exploration into adopting SAGE3 for VR XR? You know, we showed this at Cinegrade and we weren't going to show it at this meeting just because we didn't think we want to keep it focused. We do have a prototype called SAGE XR, which is basically SAGE entirely in virtual reality. It's a research prototype. It's not ready for prime time. It was primarily for us to explore how will people work differently between a physical tile display wall and in a virtual environment where they have infinite space. And we actually wrote a paper up, which we currently been submitted, but once that's out, we're happy to share the results of that. Basically, what we notice is that in a virtual environment, people definitely use far more virtual space than they do in the physical space. So given enough room, people will use it. And one of the most liberating things about working in a virtual space is that I could be at home and I could be looking at this giant display wall at multiple locations at the same time. And I don't need to have a physical wall anymore. The downside is, you got to wear that headset for now, right? And it's awfully, in Hawaii, because we don't have air conditioning most of the time, it gets awfully sweaty and then it gets moldy. And but for the rest of the world, you're probably good on that. And I think over time, the technologies, the resolution is going to get better, the cost is going to come down, the weight is going to go down. So they're definitely, that's where things really are, I think, going to go. And then we won't even have laptops anymore, frankly. We'll just have a little lightweight headset and maybe a keyboard at most, and then we're done. Shinji said, does SAGE3 support multiple clients managing multiple displays?
Yeah, in the old time, I think we need clusters of computers to support multiple displays. Is that our model going on?
So most of our SAGE3 work now is focused on single PC solutions for display walls. So we're not really supporting cluster environments, mainly because most of our users tend to have single PCs driving maybe up to 18 displays or something like that. And that's usually enough for them. And it's also easier to manage, frankly. That said, with the new model for SAGE3, it might actually be possible to do clustering, but we haven't looked at that yet. Luke, do you want to say anything? You have any comment?
Yes, so like Jason said, we haven't tried, but since the model is very distributed or every client is their own, it should be indeed possible to have each machine just displaying a part of the overall board. So it might not be the most efficient way, but it should be fairly feasible. So that I think maybe once we open source the whole project or make it public, I think if people want to work on that, I don't think it would be very hard to, at least to try.
Right. Yeah, and so our current strategy is, right now I'm connecting to the Chicago server to use SAGE, and it's actually surprisingly responsive considering I'm in Hawaii. And so we're going to keep the Chicago server there, and then we're going to set up another server in Hawaii in my lab. And so that way, we're going to let most of the folks in the Asia Pacific area connect to Hawaii because they're a little closer, trying to cut down the latency a bit for you guys. And then folks in Europe, right, can connect to Chicago. You know, everybody in between can pick and choose whether they want to go to Chicago or Hawaii. And then that way we'll get everybody using the SAGE client up and going as fast as possible without having to deal with Docker instances and so forth. And then once everyone becomes familiar and with it, we're also going to run workshops to help people Dockerize, you know, put the Docker instances on their servers in their institutions, and then they can manage on their own. So
yeah, that's also a very interesting part, because in PRAGMA, we're experimenting the distributed Kubernetes clusters in everywhere. So
okay.
that, you know, even in the Thermostat and, you know, with Leonard. So, you know, we have a distributed, you know, Kubernetes clusters. So it may be easy to duplicate the SAGE server in everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, I think, what's going to be really liberating about it. That, you know, we don't have to be the ones to do all the work anymore.
Yes.
Somebody else can do it. And, you know, over time, what that means is that we're going to delegate most of this responsibility to the research IT departments.
Okay, thank you.
There are a few other, I guess, questions in the chat. Let's see. I guess, oh, Chris was asking how long will SAGE2 be available?
So SAGE2 will be available until if the wheels fall off of it. And
right. Yeah.
And you know, thank you for pointing this out, Chris. We had noticed that recently, I think Alan Winery mentioned that there was a little alert saying that the SAGE2 Chrome plugin was unsafe or could be unsafe. And then Chris mentioned you can't even find the plugin anymore. And I just looked and said, it's gone. Someone got rid of us. So, you know, so that is great because it's forcing us to get this thing SAGE3 working so we can replace all the SAGE2 stuff with SAGE3. Our target is we want to try and release a usable SAGE3 client at supercomputing this November. And then we have a Monday, generally a Monday developers meeting for SAGE3. So I think we're discussing the possibility of opening it up. So for external folks, they can sort of listen to all the discussions going on with the development of SAGE3. We cannot answer a lot of detailed questions per person because we're trying to get work done. But if people want to listen and maybe learn about the internal guts of SAGE3, there is that possibility, with the possibility that we can open things up. But just keep in mind, if you want to know this, the folks that can participate in these technical ones meetings, they have to be pretty savvy with web development, like React and all the backend services. It goes really, really gross deep. So let me know if you're interested. Because we don't have time to handhold right now. We really have to get a lot of work done to get this working and up for mass distribution of supercomputing. Yeah. And if you want, we can also give you a copy of the client so you can try it out, at least connect in and throw a bunch of post-it boards up. Well, since there's no full permissions yet, you're going to have to learn to play nice and not delete my boards.
Okay, just sorry not to interrupt, but just trying to get through some of the other questions. I believe Luke from Mimos was asking, are there any attempts to use SAGE in manufacturing automation related environment? Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, I'm not aware of.
We have there's a Brazilian company that licensed SAGE2 that put it into products for like decision theaters and like nuclear power plants, police station monitoring, things like that. They are looking into also licensing SAGE3 to continue that work. They have some new ideas for what they want implemented, and we don't have the capacity to implement it. So they want to license SAGE3 so they can take the source code and add to it so that they can service their interests. But SAGE3 will always be open source. It's funded by NSF, so it's really for the general user community. So it'll always be open, unless you guys want to approach this company to have them do all the service stuff for you. That's fine too. They would love to build this big display walls.
Okay, and then Nan had a few questions which are being answered in the chat, but just for everyone to know, let's see, when can we get hands-on with SAGE3? I guess November or maybe somewhat sooner, depending on, I guess you'd have to talk to Jason a little bit from what he's been saying. Let's see, with SAGE3, we can now use SAGE3 without an actual tile display wall, correct? And yes. And
yeah, projector, you know, lying around, you can just plug it up and run SAGE3. You got a SAGE wall.
TV.
A TV at home, maybe in your TV.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really appealing, the infinite canvas idea, like that, being able to zoom in on your laptop and see the full thing of the wall. I think that's really cool. And then, yeah, and then her other questions I think were answered as well. Containerizing SAGE3, each institution can also have their own server hosting different boards and no need to host them all in Chicago. Yeah, I mean, eventually, I think it's interesting because SAGE2 was more kind of a distributed, like you would set up your own SAGE2 server and then you try and connect the two servers. But SAGE3, it's kind of going back, not in a bad way, but it's just kind of going back to this, okay, one centralized SAGE and then everybody just accesses it. So, I mean, I think it's very cool, but it's kind of interesting. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I guess that's about it for the questions in the chat so far. Oh, I guess one more. I guess Nan was asking, do you plan to have any access control for individual boards? So, and Luke had said yes. I don't know if you want to add some details to that for everybody, because that is kind of probably an issue.
I mean, at both sites, we're starting to use it for classes. So that's the first main scenario. I mean, we have research meeting and classes. That's the big two scenarios that we have right now. And so, and in both cases, they represent different situations, how to deal with users. Like research meeting is fairly flat hierarchy, for instance, and but a small group, you know the people. Classes might be much more structured. There's an instructor, maybe a couple of TAs, and a whole group of students. And so you want to manage that differently. And so the access control is being worked on. It's in there, but it's not enforced by any means. So because it needs some UI and stuff like that, you want to be able to visualize that. You want to assign groups and things like that. So that's it's being worked on basically. But definitely we want that. And there's also a whole login system. So right now you can use Google. You can create accounts. Probably we will integrate CI logon to access. So, for instance, all the campuses, at least in the US, and I don't know if it's international, but with CI logon, you can get a whole series of
So as you can see, you're looking at the login interface for SAGE3 right now. I'm just going to log in as guest, and you're right into the boards. So sort of adding to what Luke is talking about here, you just see the boards, but eventually there'll be rooms, basically, which have multiple boards, and then users can create their own rooms, and then you can decide what permissions you want to give to people to access rooms and boards. And so what we did was we surveyed how Zoom and how Google manages its sharing capabilities and also other platforms to try and figure out what is the minimum set that is most useful for probably the majority of people and also is most familiar. And so that's where we're at. We have a pretty good preliminary idea of what we're going to do that covers most cases. But yeah, it involves logins and roles and you know, all the usual stuff. Yeah.
And I guess this would be available on the mobile devices as well, right?
Come on.
Right?
Not yet. Okay,
Not yet.
here's the problem. Here's the problem. So if you remember when video conferencing was starting to move to web clients, right? You could run video conferencing from within your browser. Now, and even in Sage, the previous version of Sage, we could do everything from the web browser.
Yeah, yeah.
We had to back off from that because you notice that, for example, Zoom and Microsoft and all these other companies also started backing off from the pure browser model because the browser was becoming far too restrictive in terms of all the security checks that, you know, it was breaking Sage left and right all the time. It was driving us crazy because of all the new security on top of it. So the SAGE3 client is actually an Electron client. Okay, an Electron client is kind of like a glorified browser anyway, but with fewer restrictions that allow us to do more things. And so if you look at Zoom, for example, or Microsoft's video conferencing tool, ostensibly they're the same thing. They're really running kind of like a browser client, but with more control. And so that was a tough decision. And actually, truthfully, it will kind of still work. You can take a browser and go into a Sage website, SAGE3 website, and look at things, but you don't have the full richness of interaction. So like if you look at the Zoom product itself, Zoom can actually let you go into a browser to look at a video conference, but they severely restrict you where you can only see one stream at a time from the viewer because they just don't have enough control from just a pure browser environment. And Luke, do you want to add to that? I think you can probably go deeper if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's so Electron is a programmable version of Chrome basically, and you still get all the benefit of security. Now the version of Electron and Chrome are on par, so you get all the benefit of bug fixes and security updates, but it's more programmer friendly version of Chrome basically. So for instance, one of the main difference is you can do desktop sharing without the extension. That's for instance one example where it's already built into Electron, so you don't have to install a separate piece of software and things like that. And so there's many benefits of that. But so yeah, sometimes Electron apps get a bit of bad press, but we feel it's a decent compromise for us for a fairly small team to bring a thing. Yeah, if you get VC capital, you can make a native application, but then not for us. Yeah.
Just to be aware of the scale of what we're trying to do here. NSF basically, this project it's a $5 million project, which is honestly it is a lot of money. But if you can compare it to Jupyter, Jupyter is a $100 million project.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Yes.
I was actually going to ask if you were still in Chrome or Electron. So I think that's a good choice. Otherwise, you've got to maintain all these different platforms. Looks like I can move a mouse still. We run SAGE2 at UTS in Sydney. Hello from Australia.
Oh, hi.
We also have these things, which I'm sure you recognize.
Yes,
can you guess what my question is going to be? Can we have VRPN?
Oh, VRPN.
because we have this running VRPN right now. Yeah. We've got a cave in Sydney, and I've been flying through in Omega Lib, an equalizer, Omega Lib, and we can fly 6 degrees of freedom remotely. We've got a camera in the ceiling of the cave. It's a webcam, and you can actually watch what you're doing. The delay is in the webcam, not in the I/O. Right. It's great to have a mouse for just a desktop screen. How about VPN?
I think if there is, for example, a node module for VRPN, it should be possible to plug it in, I would think. The funny thing, just as an anecdote, I found one of those 3D mouse new in the box last week in the lab. Still shrink wrapped from probably like Jason's days in the lab. So,
They're
because
fantastic.
with Jason, we were trying to also revive gyro mouse, because for presentation in front of the wall, you want one of those gyro mouse. So yeah, I didn't think of VRPN, but that's an interesting point. Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is just a device other than like a screen mouse.
Yeah. And right now, through Python, you can control the pointer. So if it was emulating a pointer, it would be fairly easy. Emulating a 6DoF device might be a little bit more tricky, but I would think it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is we're starting to use the PlayStation controllers.
Sure.
You know, everyone knows where the X is. It's almost like a QWERTY keyboard. Anyway, just
yeah,
this question.
I make a note of it and put it in the issue list. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And since you're talking about VR, and again, I wasn't planning to show this earlier, but here it is. This is Sage. I'll let you see it. I'll just play it. Sage XR. Look, you have a virtual table, virtual keyboard. There's a puck, and you're calibrating. So you have physicality. We have a tracker on top of our chair. So you actually know where the real chair is. So you can actually sit in the chair in the room.
He's actually moving a physical chair.
Yeah, he's actually moving the physical chair, and the physical chair is moving in the virtual chair is moving in the virtual world. And there's a tracker on the keyboard as well. So when you move the physical keyboard, the virtual keyboard moves. We added a sensor to the keyboard, the touch sensor, that you can find the homing position for the keys. That's actually the Achilles heels for typing. Here you can see, this is running actually the older Sage, but you're seeing a little control panel manipulating something on the Sage wall. And actually this is also being reflected in the physical Sage wall in the physical world. But here instead you're doing virtual stuff. Actually, if you are interested in all the gory details, I can send you the dissertation. That's actually a public document. You can read all about it.
And our collaborator, Chris North, also has several studies in VR plus big wall and stuff like that.
But we don't think scientists are ready yet to go buy head-mounted displays. So, you know, it's for us, you know, fringe people who really one day would like to live in virtual reality. You know, that's how it goes. If I were to try to write this as an NSF proposal, they'd kill me. So.
Just a quick note, Ben said, yes, please send the dissertation to him, Ben Simmons at uts.edu.au. So
yeah, grab that. Okay.
Right. Okay, well, we're coming up on basically almost 90 minutes, so I think we'll probably end fairly soon. Are there any other questions or comments?
How many of you are into supercomputing? I'm just curious. How many can go to supercomputing this year?
Physically, not much.
Physically, Shinji, can you even go?
No, I don't think so right now.
Oh no. And Dave,
I want to, you know, but
I
I
was
should be.
Tech Paper's chair and I can't get there. Go figure.
And if he goes, he can't come back.
And well, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not looking good for people from Japan. I don't think we're going to be able to go to supercomputer.
From the latest news, like there was an email a few days ago. It looks like it was going to be a bit mixed, virtual and local people. So I don't know how they're going to manage that, but it's.
So, but if you guys are going, we're scheduled to be in Joe Mambretti's Starlight booth. So he's dedicated. He's already paid for the booth, and he's going to be there. So we said we'll be there if he has a booth, and so wish us luck. But I just want to relate something to you. You know, we've done this demo once at Cinegrid, and we did it again earlier at LandSage for Thailand. And when we did the Cinegrid presentation, there were 200 people who attended, and in this meeting we have 42. When we do the physical presentations in our BOF Birds of the Feather meetings at supercomputing, we can only get about 30, 40 people in the room. So in some ways, this kind of virtual COVID way of working is a godsend, because we are actually able to reach more people and have them see the capabilities of SAGE. So I don't know if we want to come back to the physical world. No, I do, you know, because I like to visit nice places.
Jason, can we attend if we have SAGE3 on our laptop?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be
By
there.
then we should be able to, yeah.
Yeah, why not? Very cool.
All right.
Well,
So I guess, yeah,
yeah.
if there's
Great.
nothing else.
Many of you, thank you for supporting us. Hope it was
Thank you
enjoyable.
very much. Very nice.
Yes, thank you, Jason, Luke, the whole team. I think it was really exciting. I'm glad to see we had a lot of other people too from outside of the PRAGMA community, some people from LandSage and probably some from the SAGE user community. So it's really great. We actually did have up to like about 50 people at the peak. So which is good. It was a good turnout. So yes, and so I hope we can probably share the recording perhaps also as well. We'll try and get a link out someplace. We'll get it someplace so that people will have access. And so otherwise, thanks very much everyone for joining and participating and making this probably one of the more successful webinars that we've had. And again, thanks to Jason and everybody on his team. So with that, I guess we will close. Everyone have a nice evening or day as it is in your time zone. So thanks very much.
Aloha.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much, Jason.